Okay. Good afternoon. Welcome, everyone, and good evening in Israel. The title for today's presentation is Biden and Israel, Areas of Collaboration and Confrontation. We have the honor of having Professor Eytan Gilboa with us, who is one of the top experts in the field and of US-Israel relations. And he's going to give us a lecture for about, I would say, half an hour, which will be followed by a Q&A session. So without further ado, I would like to invite our very esteemed director, Professor Krantz, to say a few words. And afterwards, I'll invite Professor Gilboa to give his lecture and the Q&A session. So Professor Krantz, the platform is yours.
Thank you very much. I'd like to welcome everybody on the Zoom network to the Canadian Institute for Jewish Research here in Montreal and in Toronto to our Zoom seminar series. We're very honored to have with us today a distinguished Israeli scholar, Professor Eytan Gilboa from the Bar Ilan University and the Besa Research Center, one of our sister centers. I'll say a few words about CIJR to orient you. CIJR is Canada's unique, independent, pro-Israel research think tank. Our fellows, our distinguished academic fellows, are drawn from across North America, Israel, and Europe. We are devoted to bringing objective and up-to-date news and analysis of major Israel and Jewish world issues quickly and directly to the public, both Jewish and non-Jewish. CIJR is also noted, we're now in our 33rd year, we are also noted for our innovative work with students, support for students on and off our very much controverted campuses, as you know. There's a great deal of pro-Palestinian activism and BDS organization. So we support our students in many ways, not least through a unique Baruch Cohen Israel internship program for training students for on-campus and off-campus advocacy, and through their wonderful magazine, which is unique in North America, called Dateline Middle East. Before turning the introduction of Professor Gilboa over to Jack, I do want to say that in addition to everything else we do, we run the internship program for students. We are very much involved in Jewish continuity and preparing students for Israel advocacy. And I would like to use this occasion to announce something special. We're going to set up a special Manfred Gestenfeld Student Scholarship in the Institute in honor of and commemoration of our great friend and my colleague, Manfred Gestenfeld, the great contemporary student of contemporary anti-Semitism, Zichrono Levracha, who passed away in Jerusalem recently. So finally, I'd like to thank all our academic fellows, our active board members, our international supporters, who with us have sustained the Institute through very difficult COVID-19 period. But we're here, we're alive and kicking, as you can see, and we're planning our 33rd gala, which is going to be coming in May. We'll keep you all informed about that. So now, thanks to everyone who's with us here today and bearing with us, as we have some teething trouble, but we have a wonderful program with Professor Gilboa, and I'll turn the event over to Jack Kinsler to introduce him.
Thank you very much for a few nice words. Professor Gilboa asked not to be too long, so all of you got his CV, and I'll just, without any further ado, I'll ask Professor Gilboa to start with his presentation. So thank you, Professor Gilboa, and we are eager to listen to what you have to say about today's subject.
Thank you very much, Jack and Professor Krantz, for the invitation to speak to your audience. Good afternoon in Montreal. This is evening in Tel Aviv. I would like to begin with an area where I do not anticipate much changes. This is the field of strategic cooperation between the United States and Israel. Even in difficult times of disagreements between the United States and Israel, this particular area is not being compromised. even during the Obama years, during 2016, the last year of his tenure at the White House, he signed with Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu a long-term foreign aid agreement promising Israel every year $3.8 billion for 10 years. It started in 2018 and will last for 10 years until 2028. I think the term aid is misleading between you give aid without any expectations for returns, but the United States is receiving in return for this aid, so to speak, intelligence, weapons development and experimentation, maneuvers, joint maneuvers in the Mediterranean and in the Middle East, and other issues. This is considered a budgetary matter, so Congress has to approve every year this sum of money, and so every year there's going to be a discussion in Congress, but I do not see much changes. And every year for the next 10 years, Israel will receive that amount of money and will continue very close collaboration with the United States in security and national security areas. The next issue is more problematic, and this is Iran. So I need first to say that even back in 2014, 2015, when the United States negotiated the Iran nuclear deal under Obama, there was no disagreement or any question about the goal. Everybody, and I think except for maybe Syria and North Korea, everybody in the world agrees that Iran should not have nuclear weapons. So the only disagreement has been since then on the best means to accomplish that goal. When I look at what we have seen so far from the Biden administration on the nuclear weapons issue, we see a few disturbing signs, which I would like to speak about. First of all, all the people in key foreign policy and national security positions in the Biden administration are graduates of Obama, and not only that, many of those were closely engaged in the negotiations that produced the 2015 nuclear agreement. Secretary of State is Tony Blinken, who was Deputy National Security during the last years of the Obama administration. His Deputy Secretary of State is Wendy Sherman, who negotiated failed agreements with North Korea as well as with Iran. We'll speak about it in a minute. National Security Advisor is Jack Sullivan, who in 2013, 2014 was involved in the secret negotiations at that time with Iran. The director of the CIA is William Burns, who was at that time Assistant Secretary of State, and the last person is Robert Morley, who Biden appointed to be his special envoy or emissary for Iran. So if these people are going just to prove or at least attempt to prove that Obama was right, that his agreement with Iran was a perfect agreement, that Trump was all wrong, then they will be wrong again. If, on the other hand, they have learned the lessons from the 2015 agreement and implement them effectively, then perhaps we would see a better approach to Iran. In the last few weeks, we have seen all kinds of messages. The United States and Iran are negotiating. In professional terms, in scholarly terms, we call it negotiations over the negotiations. and they exchange messages directly and indirectly. Tony Blinken said just the other day that the United States is attempting to resume negotiations with Iran via European allies. So they are already beginning to think about negotiations. Both sides have already made a few statements about what they want to achieve in the negotiations. Iran has two major preconditions. Number one, first, remove all the sanctions that harsh sanctions that Trump imposed on Iran. And second, they want the United States to go back exactly to the 2015 nuclear deal. The United States is saying, we are not going to lift the sanctions until you are ready to negotiate. And we don't intend to go back to the 2015 agreement. We need to fix a few deficiencies, and we will have to negotiate all of that. So we see all kinds of statements about the negotiations. Both sides would like to negotiate. Iran, because it wants the sanctions lifted, and the United States wants to stop the Iranian race to the bomb. But the two sides are also talking indirectly via both military and diplomatic means. Militarily, Iran has been using pro-Iranian militias in Iraq to attack American bases there. And there was an attack just a few weeks ago on an American base near Baghdad. And Biden decided to retaliate. He attacked, he used measured force, just very limited reprisal, retaliation against a militia in the area. It's along the Iraqi-Iranian border inside Iraq. So they were speaking in military terms. But more than that, the two sides have also exchanged all kinds of other messages. And here I think we have to a little bit worry about the American mixed messages. I can bring just a few examples, I have many more, of those kinds of messages that in my judgment are problematic because they seem to appease Iran. The first example is the civil war in Yemen. The Houthis in Yemen are supported by the Iranians. They are Shiites, and they rebel again. They are rebelling against the government, which is supported by Saudi Arabia. And it's a terrible civil war. Attacks on daily basis on civilians, both sides. So Trump put the Houthis on the list of terrorist organizations. So what Biden did, he lifted that designation, and the expectation was that the Houthis will at least reduce their daily attacks. They attack every day oil fields and installations in Saudi Arabia, obviously with Iranian weapons, with Iranian blessing. And so the expectation was we need to provide aid to people suffering in Yemen. Therefore, this would be a good start. What happened? Exactly the opposite. The Houthis not only decreased, but they are increasing their daily attacks on Saudi Arabia. There are a few other examples, such as you might have heard about the attack of Iran on an Israeli cargo ship. just a few days ago. In retaliation, Israel, according to foreign sources, retaliated against Iranian ships supplying Syria with weapons and with oil in violation of sanctions. And the CIA leaked to the Wall Street Journal just a week ago that Israel has been attacking about 20 ships like that. This is a message to Iran that we are not satisfied with this Israeli activities. We would like to negotiate with you. So these are two clear examples. Yes, there was another thing. There was an intelligence report that the CIA leaked about the murder, terrible murder of the Saudi Arabian journalist Khashoggi, and they simply copied the Turkish. He was murdered in Istanbul. This was just a copy of the Turkish report, which is a little bit questionable. And the message was to both Saudi Arabia and Iran. To Saudi Arabia, the message is that the United States under Biden would not be that satisfied with violations of human rights, which brings to question about this whole approach, because Iran is violating human rights 10,000 times more than Saudi Arabia. And I haven't heard during the Obama years, and even now, I haven't heard anything from the Biden administration about that issue. Both the Obama and the Trump administrations have been wrong about the effects of both the 2015 agreement as well as of the sanctions about the Iranian regime. The Obama administration assumed that, number one, legitimizing Iran, giving Iran legitimization for their hegemonial aspirations in the region, as well as releasing 120, maybe $140 billion in frozen assets, would go to the Iranian people, would increase the power of the moderates, would decrease the rule of the Islamic Republicans there, Republican Guard. Trump thought that the sanctions would create a rebellion, maybe an uprising, or at least an uproar against the regime. And if the regime finds itself threatened, then it would be ready to negotiate and make concessions. Both assumptions were wrong. So the question is whether or not we will see now lessons learned from those two wrong assumptions. Trump applied maximum pressure, didn't do anything. There were too many holes in the Obama agreement. Now, the problem with Iran is not just the nuclear program. And just today, they have announced use of advanced centrifuges. They are called, it's IR4, very fast, 174 of them. And they announced a plan to enrich uranium above 20%, which says something about their intentions. For years, the Ayatollahs in Tehran have claimed that they have no intention whatsoever to produce nuclear weapons. They even said there was a fatwa, a religious document prohibiting the development of nuclear weapons. This was a lie. They have been lying and cheating all the time about their nuclear ambitions. And this design to enrich beyond 20% means only one thing: nuclear weapons. The 2015 agreement left a few issues out. One of them was the development and experimentation with ballistic missiles. The kind of missiles that they have been working on are only for use to carry nuclear weapons. There is no other rationale for developing this kind of weapons. This was left out. But in addition to all of that, Iran has been trying to undermine governments in the region. This idea is connected to Khomeini, the father of the Islamic Revolution in Iran. He wrote that the Iranian brand of Islamic government should be exported to other governments and states in the region. So what they have been doing for a long time is to undermine governments which they consider to be corrupt, and especially the pro-Western governments. They have been using terrorism, violence, military intervention, Syria, Lebanon, and now in Yemen. So this is so Iran is bigger than the issue of Iran is just larger than just nuclear weapons. The idea of nuclear weapons is to make Iran like hegemonial power in the region. So in the last few years, and more so in the last few months, we see shifting alliances in the Middle East. And for that purpose, I would like to use a PowerPoint presentation that I want to show you. So just one second. So so this is I'm showing you the Middle East here in green. You can see this is the map here divides the region into Shiite and Sunni, an historical religious confrontation of many centuries ago. So there is a clear. So there is a clear, sorry, just one second. So this green area, no, this is not working well. Okay, the green area here you can see, so this is Iran with about 90 to 95% Shiites. Iraq is about 65, Syria and Lebanon. All of these areas here are predominantly Shiite. There are also Shiite minorities in Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar. In Yemen, it's about 50% where we have this civil war going on, the one I mentioned earlier. And this is what we call the Shiite Crescent. And you can see like this crescent, the northern part of it is Iran, Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon. You see the Shiite minorities in the Gulf states and all the way going to Yemen. And this Shiite Crescent is supposed to threaten, intimidate the Sunni predominantly countries in the region. So this is a major threat. And I want now to draw your attention to another power, another regional power, which is Turkey. Turkey is also under Erdogan, aspires to become like the dominating Muslim state in the entire region. Erdogan considers himself to be a sultan. He wants to revive the Ottoman Empire. And he is involved, you can see here, he is involved in conflict with Greece. This is a historical conflict with Cyprus. About half of Cyprus is occupied by Turkey. Cyprus is divided. He has very close relationship with the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt. He's also involved in Libya, and he has a very close relationship with Qatar. I'm mentioning Turkey for a second for something that you will see in a minute. So this is another map of the region, and I want this map demonstrates the shifting alliances in the Middle East. So this is Iran again with the Shiite Crescent here and Yemen here, and so the blue circles here represent the number one, the Abraham Accords. So it's Israel, Bahrain, Emirates, Sudan, and Morocco. So you can see all the blue circles represent these Abraham Accords with Israel. The yellow circles represent potential members, future members of the Israeli Strategic Alliance within the Abraham Accords. So it's the countries mentioned, Kuwait and Saudi Arabia and Oman, as well as Mauritania, which is on the other side, next to Morocco. So this is like the Gulf area that is part of the shifting alliance. And Israel signed those normalization agreements with the Gulf states, mostly because of the Iranian threat. So if you remember, the Abraham Accords is a counter alliance to the Shiite alliance. It's a Sunni Arab alliance with Israel against Iran, against Shiite Iran. But I've added here, I mentioned earlier Turkey, I have added here Cyprus and Greece as well, because this is a new axis that is being built in the area. It is a strategic and economic axis. So it starts from here, from Oman, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Israel, and Cyprus and Greece. So Cyprus and Greece, this part of the axis is mainly organized to block Turkey. This axis is mainly built to counter Iran. So this is now emerging in the area, and it is based on yes. So it's based on security, energy, and technology, and this is a significant part of that emerging alliance. First of all, it's energy. So you see here, Israel has, as you may know, discovered huge deposits of gas. So the idea is to build a pipeline from here to Cyprus, a few places in Greece, to Greece, and then to Italy, and maybe to the Balkan states. So this is energy, and this is economic, not just strategic. Then there is another dimension here. There is a pipeline that goes from Israel, most southern port of Eilat, to Ashkelon. And there are all kinds of ideas of using that pipeline. This is Saudi Arabia. These are oil fields. They have already a major pipeline, goes all the way to this port right here. And the idea is to build pipelines, either this way or that way, through the Red Sea to the Ashkelon, and from Ashkelon to Europe. So this is basically this is the PowerPoint presentation I wanted to show you about the Israeli-Palestinian issue and what Biden has said he would do. He also said he would restore American aid to the Palestinians, about $500 million to the Palestinian Authority, and another $400 million to UNRWA. This is the United Nations agency helping Palestinian refugees. The Palestinians would like to see from Biden a similar approach that Obama conducted toward them. They want him to be much more active in resuming negotiations. What they have in mind is American pressure on Israel to make concessions even before they are ready to negotiate. I hope that this is not, that Biden would not accept, would not work by these expectations. But obviously, he will be trying, and Tony Blinken, the Secretary of State, said that the United States will try to resume negotiations between Israel and the Palestinians, and will also consult with Europe about it. I don't think that we will see those intensive efforts to promote Arab-Israeli negotiations, Israeli-Palestinian negotiations of the kind that Obama did. Obama has been obsessive about it with no much success. And the last issue I want to talk about, which I think is very serious, is the American approach to the United Nations and the international organizations. Israel has been the most discriminated against country at the UN itself, and more so in UN agencies. And I am referring in particular to the UN Human Rights Council and the International Criminal Court in The Hague. You may know that about 80%, no less than 80% of UN General Assembly resolutions adopted every year on a single country are in Israel. Most of them are one-sided, ridiculous, highly politicized. But we see the same story at the Human Rights Council, where it's a joke. The Human Rights Council, the UN Human Rights Council, is a joke because it is run by the countries who are the biggest violators of human rights in the world, like Cuba, Venezuela, some of the Libya, Iran, China. This is a joke, but they have one article for human rights violations for Israel, and one else, which is number 7, and one article for the rest of the world. Why I'm saying that? Because activities against Israel, anti-Israeli activities at the United Nations Human Rights Council led to a recent decision in the International Criminal Court in The Hague to investigate alleged Israeli war crimes in Gaza, the West Bank, and East Jerusalem. I've written a few pieces about it in a big article. All of these decisions, especially the last one by the International Criminal Court, is highly ridiculous. It is unprofessional. The court has violated its own rules and conduct. The prosecutor is guilty of conspiring all kinds of things against Israel with the Palestinians, without the Palestinians. But it's very serious, because if there's a new prosecutor, Khan from Britain, Muslim Pakistani of Pakistani origin, he will have to decide whether to begin this investigation or not. But it could be serious because, unlike other UN institutions, this one can investigate individuals, and they can issue arrest warrants against Israeli policymakers, officials, and military officers. There's much concern here in Israel about it. Biden would like to resume American positive approach to international organizations. He said that he would bring back the United States into the Human Rights Council to see if he can have some influence from within. Well, I can tell him, don't waste your time, because this policy had been already attempted. Obama brought back the United States into the Human Rights Council, he thought he would be able to change the corrupt processes and decisions of that body, and he failed. So there's no reason to believe that, that the Biden administration would do better. And so the question is going to be whether or not under Biden, Israel will enjoy some protection from the United States in these terrible organizations. I can tell you that yesterday, the president of Israel and the chief of staff are visiting Germany, Austria, and France, and they have two major issues on the agenda. One of them is the Iran nuclear negotiations, and the other one is exactly this the International Criminal Court decision to investigate Israel. So overall, I'm summing up, overall, we don't know yet. The Biden administration is developing their strategies and specific policies toward the region and Israel. Israel should be trying to influence as much as possible the thinking in Washington. Obviously, right now, Israel is not alone. It speaks together with American traditional Arab allies in the region, those members of the Abraham Accords, and this is quite a force that the Biden administration will have to take into consideration. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Gilboa, for your presentation. We'll proceed. I'll just start the Q&A with two questions that were sent before this event. So the two questions are basically the same. And the question is basically, should Israel decide to attack Iran to destroy its nuclear capability, do you think that the Biden administration will try to sabotage it the same way Obama did years ago? In other words, will the Biden administration support Israel in such an eventuality, or we will be basically forced to act alone?
So one has here to make a distinction between threats and actual policies. I don't think that Israel can use a military option against Iran without some American support. I think that this is also something that perhaps has to be learned from the past. It is clear that if you show enthusiasm for negotiations, you increase the intransigence and the tough positions of the other side. This is what happened to Obama. Obama also, the more he said all the options are on the table, including the military option, the less it was believed. And so Iran felt that he would not use force. Iran believes today that the United States has no appetite to use force against Iran following the failed military interventions in Afghanistan and Iraq. And so they think that this is not going to happen. They hear voices from Israel saying that if nothing is done, and if it's very clear that Iran is going to break away and have a bomb soon, despite all commitments made by Europe and other countries to prevent Iran from having nuclear weapons, then perhaps the idea is to influence Iranian policies. And the chief of staff said, we are now considering all kinds of options, military options. I believe that much of it is designed to affect the negotiations, to intimidate Iran in a way, because if there is any real reliable threat of using force against Iran is the Israeli threat. But given the Iran's proxies in the area, Hezbollah has 150,000 missiles. They would do whatever Iran will tell them to do. They are now working on making those missiles accurate, and so this is a major threat. also the Islamic Jihad in Gaza, and also Hamas to a certain extent, also Iranian proxies. And Iran is trying very hard to build a third front after Lebanon, after Gaza, a third front from Syria. And this is exactly what Israel is trying to prevent. And there was just the other night, we do it all the time. Just the other night, we attacked weapons, depots, factories inside Syria. And but the bottom line is, I think, in my judgment, is that it's going to be extremely difficult for Israel to use military force against Iran without American support. And I don't see that kind of support coming from the Biden administration, not in the next year or so.
So Dida, can you proceed with the...
Yes, thank you, Professor Gilboa. That was extremely interesting. And I must say, I did learn a lot. I hope that everyone feels the same way as I do. I have a few
I
questions.
can't understand you. Who are you?
Oh,
Hello?
are you speaking to me, Molly Green? Okay, sorry. I think Molly Green was talking to someone else. I apologize for that. So this is a very interesting one. Will the meeting of the Pope and Shiite Sistani have some positive effect?
The what? Can you repeat
He
the
says,
names?
the question is, will the meeting of the Pope and the Shiite Sistani
Yes.
have some positive effect? It's an out of the box questions.
Yes. No, I don't think so. There's a whole question about the extent and level of cooperation between Iraqi Shiites and Iranian Shiites. The Shiite community in Iraq is divided. Some of them are Shiites, but also nationalists, and they do not like, they dislike the Iranian intervention in their domestic and foreign affairs. They don't like the pro-Iranian militias on Iraqi soil. They don't like the use of those militias against all kinds of targets inside Iraq as well as in Syria. And there is another group which is less nationalist. They consider Iran, they consider religion as a much more powerful common denominator, and they are in favor of close cooperation with Iran. I think the camp that is dissatisfied with Iran is larger than the other camp. The visit of the Pope didn't make any difference. It's very clear that the situation, the conditions of Christians in the entire region is terrible. He failed to use the opportunity to talk about that problem. Many Christians have been murdered, massacred, forced to leave their places. This is also true, incidentally, in the Palestinian territories. And maybe he thought he would use the opportunity to protect the Christians. And if this is the case, then I don't think he had achieved this goal. I don't hear you.
Yeah, thank you for that very clear answer. Now, here is one with regard to Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia was very successful in shooting down Houthi missiles. How strong is Saudi Arabia militarily, and how dependent are they on the United States?
Okay, so first of all, my main argument is this: Saudi Arabia is weak. It's very weak. They are intercepting some incoming missiles, but we know that just a year ago, Iran was able, from Iran, to damage the biggest oil production industry in Saudi Arabia. They reduced Saudi Arabia export of oil by 50%, and it took them a lot of time to repair that.
Right.
It's the whole situation there is very interesting, because every time Iran uses force, either directly from across the Persian Gulf or from Yemen, they told the Houthis in Yemen to take responsibility for that. So Iran does not want to look as the one that
Right.
attacks directly
They
Saudi
use the
Arabia.
Houthis as a proxy.
Yeah, but everybody knows that. And Saudi Arabia has done nothing directly against Iran. They say, okay, if the Houthis are taking the responsibility, we will attack the Houthis. But it's a very problematic situation there. And this is why, although Saudi Arabia has not yet joined the Abraham Accords and the new Israeli-Sunni Strategic Alliance, obviously without them, this alliance would not have been built. And they are waiting. I think that as you might have seen on the map, there are 4 potential states to join the Israeli Sunni Arab Alliance: Saudi Arabia and Kuwait, Oman, and Mauritania. Netanyahu just said the other day that these 4 will be joining the alliance. It may take some time, but they rely on Israel much more than they rely on the United States. Also, the United States is coming hard against Saudi Arabia. They blame Mohammed bin Salman, the crown prince, for violating human rights. So the human rights is becoming now a major policy norm for the United States, and so Saudi Arabia feels that the United States under Biden does not consider it as a close ally as it used to be in earlier periods.
Right. That's very interesting. I have another question with regard to the impact on the Jewish community. And I'm just going to read you this question. Apparently, Lee Smith wrote in a tablet magazine that Barack Obama's plan was never about stopping Iran from obtaining the bomb. It was about realigning American interests in the Middle East in order to remake the Democratic Party at home, suppress moderate Jewish influence. Do you have any comments with regard to that?
Well, I don't know. This is domestic politics in the United States.
Right.
I think, first of all, I think that Obama, and this is also true for Trump, and I think would also be true for Biden. The United States is withdrawing from the world, and the reason for that is again the failures in Afghanistan and Iraq. And so Obama said, we don't want any longer to serve as the world policeman. And he adopted all kinds of disengagement policies from the Middle East. He stayed in the Middle East because of the Islamic State. The Islamic State prevented him from getting out completely from the region and moving to Asia. He used the slogan of like pivot Asia. We have this saying in the Middle East that if you want to disengage from the Middle East, and then the Middle East is running after you, you cannot do it. And this was true also for Trump. You know, Trump said America first. There was this kind of tendency to prefer domestic issues over international issues, and so. And Trump also was not that happy about engagement in the Middle East, about involvement in the Middle East. And I think Biden, you have those failed wars in the region, but also you have now COVID-19, and you have economic recession, and you have other priorities in the United States. So this is one story. The other one is, yes, I think Obama had a worldview about the region, and he thought that eventually Iran will become democratic.
Right.
And he thought that the nuclear agreement will accelerate that process. Obviously, in 2009, there was a huge uprising in Iran against the against the elections. The elections were falsified. The results were falsified, rigged. They were rigged, and he didn't do anything. Why? Because his priority was to reach that nuclear agreement. So Trump had another vision. We still don't know what is Biden's vision. I think the problem with the Middle East in general, and I think what I want to say is Biden is going to be judged on his ability to prevent Iran from becoming a nuclear power. If Iran becomes a nuclear power, this would end the regime of preventing nuclear proliferation, and many Middle Eastern countries will feel forced to do the same thing. Saudi Arabia and Egypt, it's going to be a huge nuclear race in the Middle East, and you can just imagine what that would mean for a region, for a very unstable region like the Middle East. So this,
I thank you for that answer, and we have a lot of questions in this line in the queue with regard to distinguishing Biden from Obama. But this particular question, I think, addresses what you just explained. When push came to shove in the Syria conflict and Hafez al-Assad crossed the red line that Obama had himself set up, Obama refused to act. We know he did. He set the red line. He didn't do anything about it. But Joe Biden, after only a few weeks in office, reacted promptly to an Iranian proxy group's attack in Iraq by bombing the attacker's base in Syria. Does this indicate a more interventionist approach, and perhaps a more interventionist approach in Syria and also on the part of the Biden administration?
No, it does not indicate right now anything. As I explained earlier, the two sides are very keen on negotiating a nuclear agreement. And what they do now is to exchange messages. And limited military means are designed to affect the initial positions of the two sides in the negotiations. Now, I think that drawing red lines, and then when the other side crosses that red line and you do nothing, is a huge mistake. If you think that you're not going to be able to punish the one that you warned if that body would cross a red line, and then you don't operate. If you don't draw lines, if you are not prepared to punish those who cross that red line. Now, this is not, Biden did not draw a red line. An American base in Baghdad was attacked. So if Biden had done nothing, this would have meant that he is ready to make all the concessions in the world to Iran. So sometimes they create the impression that they are going to be tough. Like Blinken said, we are not going to make any gestures, just in return for resumption of negotiations with Iran. So you have to live up for that. So so this particular reprisal does not indicate anything.
So the final question I think that we have here, because they're all in the same vein that you've already answered, but this one, I guess, sums it up. While negotiations will eventually take place, could it not be too late, since the centrifuges keep turning and Iran would have already achieved their goals?
No, there are all kinds of estimates about the time needed for Iran to reach enough uranium and to have the technology to build bombs. It is not just the enrichment of uranium. You have to be able to build a bomb, and this is another story. Iran has an excellent nuclear scientific infrastructure, better than most of the countries in the Middle East, maybe in the world. and they have been building that infrastructure for a long time. I think, see, the sanctions are really hurting them and severely hurting them. In June, there are going to be presidential elections. And this is going to be quite interesting because the Republican guards they feel threatened. How do I know that? Because they want their own candidate to win those elections. In the past, like the President Rouhani is considered a moderate. Well, moderation in Iran is always a relative term. Even the most moderates are quite extreme by objective criteria. But the fact that they want now to control the government itself means that they are a little bit concerned about their standing with the people in the first place, and also with other sources of power inside Iran. So this is going to be interesting to what extent Iranian leaders would simply refuse to negotiate with the United States. Tony Blinken said just 2 or 3 days ago, he admitted, we have been trying to start negotiations with Iran. We have asked European allies to help us start negotiations. What was the answer? Iran said no. And Iran said no also in the past. When Obama won the presidential elections of 2008, one of the first things he did is to engage Iran, to talk to Iran. He invited Iran to negotiations. Iran said no. So this is how they behave. And so I'm not so sure that right now the Republican guards want Iran to be nuclear. They don't care about anything else. So the answer should be, first of all, both the United States and the European Union have to realize that. They have to understand that Iran is determined to acquire nuclear weapons. The EU is so weak, is so naive, is so soft about Iran. This is really ridiculous, but this is what has happened. And so they themselves say, Europe is saying, those ballistic missiles that were left out from the agreement we are worried about them because they can reach Europe. Have they done anything about it? So far, nothing. And so I don't think it's too late. If Europe will join with the United States in imposing even harsher sanctions, and there are harsher sanctions on Iran, there is a chance that the regime will decide to negotiate. I don't know about the results of those negotiations, but the regime will negotiate only if the conditions, especially the economic conditions in Iran, would threaten their survival. And if this were to happen, then probably they could slow down, not stop, slow down the race to the bomb.
Professor Gilboa, I want to thank you. And before Jack gives you the official thank you on behalf of CIJR, I personally want to thank you, but I also want to thank CIJR for choosing, first of all, you to give this talk, because it has illuminated for me some very complex issues, and you have made them really clear. And I really do appreciate your approach and the way you've clarified some very, very complicated, complex issues that we have to face. So I thank you, and I thank CIJR for doing this very interesting talk. And I hope that we have an opportunity to continue the dialogue and going forward. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much also, Professor Gilboa and Dida. But Professor Gilboa, I want to give you many thanks for taking the time to spend some time with us and illuminate us on subjects that and topics that are not simple, pretty complex. I can just deduct from all the questions and your talk as well that definitely Iran is a major concern for all of us in Israel, outside of Israel, all those who care about Israel. And there is cause to be worried of what's going to happen in the future. And we just have to hope that things will turn the right way for the state of Israel and for the region as well. But also in the same vein, I think that because of the complexity of the relations with the US over the years, the ups and downs with the various administrations, I think that Israel definitely should look also east to an ally, and it does probably, because I see that Benjamin Netanyahu understands that. A country like India is definitely a major country that Israel should do everything in its capacity to get closer to and become really close allies as part of the dynamics that's going on in the Middle East. And let's hope that the alliances that are being right now put in place, that you mentioned some of them, and then other ones, will definitely change this map that we are facing right now in the Middle East. So really, thank you again. Thank you also all the attendees for taking the time to be with us. I would wish all of you a very happy Passover and good health. And let's hope for better times coming soon. So Professor Gilboa, again, have a nice evening there in Israel. And thank you very much.
I wish all of you a happy and enjoyable Pesach.
All the best.
Okay.
Bye-bye, everybody.